Hey Reddit, when did your something's not right here gut feeling ever save you? I went to hospital with shortness of breath and my heart racing. They did a chest x-ray, blood test for blood clots, ECG, and a few other tests but all came back normal. After observing me overnight everything still looked good. Oxygen saturation was perfect, my heart rate was still a bit elevated but nothing too crazy, and it seemed that it was likely leftover symptoms from a bad virus that I'd had a week or so earlier. The ear doctor asks me how I would feel if they send me home, and I just had a bad feeling about it all. I told him as such, and that I had no real basis for it, except that I just felt off about it. He said fair enough, let's try one more test, and if that comes back negative then we'll send you up to general medicine, and see if they can track something down. The test was a VQ scan that found despite all other tests showing no results for blood clots, I actually had a whole bunch of them in both lungs. I ended up with a diagnosis of unprovoked bilateral pulmonary embolisms, and I'm on blood thinners for life. Super grateful both for the bad feeling, and the ear doctor who was willing to listen to it. I was 15 years old and my mom dropped me off at McDonald's to get breakfast, while she went across the street to get Starbucks. It was a shopping mall in suburbia and we were on the way to pick up a new kitten a few hours away. Instead of walking the 100 yards to my mom I sat outside waiting for her to pick me up. Teenagers I guess. As I'm standing there a guy in an old station wagon with 2 kids in the back starts talking to me. He asks me where I'm going, and I say whatever town it was. He says he's going there too with his kids, and asks if I want to come. I tell him no, that my mom is across the street, and he comes closer. My gut is saying something is off, so I see a random woman walk out of Starbucks, and I point to her, and say that's my mom right there. He freaked out, and left really quick. I still remember those 2 kids in the backseat. They looked so off. I wonder to this day if they are okay. My aunt told me a story about my dad, who greatly dislikes his sister, and is an all-around asshole 98% of the time, calling her out of the blue one night, while she was in college. She answered, he said he didn't know why, but he had this urge to call her, to make sure she was okay. She told him she was fine, and thanked him for calling to check on her. She never told anyone else except me, and hopefully a therapist or 2, but she was holding the bottle of pills she was planning to commit suicide with, right when he called her. 20 some years later, and she's very happy with her decision to live. Forgot one. About 10 years ago, working security at a site about 50 miles from home, got off shift at midnight, and didn't bother to change out of uniform, because I was only going to stop for gas. 2 stations in the town I was working in were open after midnight, but it slipped my mind as I drove past the first one. Pulled into the other, same brand, same gas price, same sort of dump entirely, and just didn't like something about it. Nobody else around, Buddy Clark, that I could see, but I decided to go back to the other one. Topped off and headed back out of town. I get close to that station again. 3 city cop cars, 2 deputies and a state trooper are outside blocking the road with guns drawn. Turns out a city cop walked in on a robbery. Dude put a bullet in his vest, and the store owner knocked the robber out cold with a bat before the cop could recover enough to get his gun out. That would have been me, in a uniform with a nice shiny badge, but no body armor. I was in the Amazon as the end to a 3-month solo trip around Latin America. Wanted to enjoy one last walk through the jungle before leaving, so left my jungle lodge around 8 AM to walk down to a small river nearby. I stop and close my eyes to listen to the sounds as the jungle is super loud with crickets, birds, insects, etc. Almost immediately I got a weird feeling and felt really uncomfortable, which was weird because up until then I'd only felt peaceful and happy. When I opened my eyes, I realized everything had gone completely quiet, which was definitely not normal and not something I had experienced in other rainforests I'd been to. It was bizarre. I immediately felt that I had to leave and fast. After I dipped and got back to the jungle lodge, I told the tour guide what happened, and he said it usually only gets quiet when there is a big predator close by. Thanks but no thanks. Not me, but my mother saved my grandfather's life when he had a stroke in his chair in their living room. We had all started to walk around the development when my mother, after about 50 to 75 meters from the house, said, "I'm going to go back and check on dad." I went with her and I nearly witnessed my grandfather die. He was on the chair, conscious, but unable to move or talk, just looking at my mother with bulging eyes. She called 911 once, then twice when she felt that they were running late. Ambulance came, got him on the stretcher, but it was too wide to fit out the door. We ended up tearing the door frame off to get him out. Because he was conscious, he actually remembers the ride to the hospital. He told us later that he heard the driver or someone say, "There is not a chance that this guy lives." That was when I was around 5 to 6 years old. He is still alive to this day, more than a decade later. At my mother's funeral, part of his speech was about how, without my mother, he would not have been able to spend time with her during her final years of life. And for that, he is eternally grateful. In 2004, on Boxing Day, not me but my mother, family trip including all cousins and extended family on my dad's side to visit the coastal south of Sri Lanka on vacation. About 20 people in all. Well planned trip. Last moment my mother didn't want to go. No reason at all. None of us could get her to explain why, but she refused to go. So we went inland on a different trip to see some other relatives. Around midday, the entire extended family, now on both sides, were sitting shocked in front of the television watching the very same hotel we booked, being washed away live by that tsunami. To date, she still can't explain what she felt. My boyfriend and I were visiting friends for a week in Phoenix. We girls were lounging at the pool while the guys were flexing their grilling skills. My boyfriend paused a moment, stood very still, then told me to go get dressed. We had to go right now. I wanted to fuss but something told me not to. We drove straight through to San Antonio, right to his parents' very rural house. Before cell phones, and they didn't have a landline within a half mile. Seconds before we arrived, his little sister had jumped off of a rain barrel and landed on a metal spike that went straight up through her foot and into her leg. His dad was at work, so there was no car available there. She was bleeding like crazy and his mother had just walked out and found her. I don't know what spoke to him in Phoenix, but it would have been all bad if we had not arrived exactly when we did. I was president of a club, and a guy who'd recently joined just set off my alarm bells, but he never did anything wrong. I still couldn't shake the feeling he was off. I asked my best friend, a pretty burly guy, to just keep an eye on him during a conference we went to. Most of the club, minus me, went to a party at the conference. My best friend kept an eye on the weird guy for most of the night, and ended up stopping him from raping a passed out drunk girl. I pretty much always trust my gut feelings now. I was driving, and it started to snow. I noticed that I was going a bit fast and strongly sensed I should slow down. I did, and a couple seconds later I came up around a bend with the road suddenly being covered in ice. I started to fishtail while sliding directly towards two people standing outside their car. They had wrecked in the same manner that I was about to do and were standing outside their car with me heading straight for them. I quickly thought of my options and ended up doing a hard right straight into the highway barrier. I slid nearly 100 plus feet, dragging the front of my car to slow it down. Because I had decided to slow down, I was able to give the two guys enough time to get out of the way before I slammed into their cars. Even though I totaled my car, which was sad, I did not end up killing two people that night. The police did not end up ticketing anyone, thankfully, and they finally sanded the road after we had all wrecked. Lol. Snow while driving still scares me to this day. We were looking at houses a while back and found one that was great location, would have been perfect size for us, and didn't appear to need any work other than new carpet and stuff I wanted to do, like painting and switching the it over from oil burning furnace. I just had a nagging feeling about it, and my husband agreed. As much as we loved it, something was off with it. I actually thought ghost or something silly like that, and we ended up passing on it. I was still kicking myself about it until a few months later, when it had a major electrical fire. The whole house and everything in it was a total loss, and the family that lived there barely got out alive. I smelled burning plastic early in the morning at my family cottage and almost went back to sleep. I was around 15, but got up to investigate. A socket on the outside of the building had caught fire and flames were shooting up the wall. The rest of my family was still sleeping, and there wasn't enough smoke for the alarms to go off. I ran and got the fire extinguisher, got my dad up, and put it in his hands, and pointed him towards the fire. Stopped it and called the fire department. It's for stories like this why I always get up when I smell something burning. I get really stressed out about it. 2 summers ago I woke up to the smell of fire and found out that a neighbor was burning leaves in his backyard and it had gone out of control. So scary. My mom dropped my 3-year-old brother off at daycare before she had to work in the morning. When she got to work she had this terrible feeling something was wrong with him. She ended up leaving work and drove to the daycare. She found the daycare lady inside sleeping, while the daycare kids, including my brother, were running around the pool. My brother never went back to that daycare again. My dad had to go to court to settle a way overdue payment for the place he worked at. He was going to take me with him, so I can be more exposed to the adult world, so to speak. However, that meant he would have to leave the office back door unlocked, so the rest of the staff could clock in. He suddenly didn't feel right about it, and decided to have me man the office instead. He got T-boned outside the courthouse on the passenger side of the car that day. The car was totaled, and I would have gotten severely hurt if I was there. I was going to meet up with someone from Marketplace to buy a phone and the feeling hit me, so I called the woman and a man answered trying to play off the fact he's a man, and I passed by where we were meeting at and it was dark and I heard voices in the background on the phone call. I never stopped the car and kept going. Pretty sure I saved myself from at the very least a mugging, but learned a good lesson. Always meet in a public place. You can meet at police stations. I believe most are okay with this. I was walking to the barber shop, and for some reason, everything just felt off. I ignored the feeling, but every step I took just made me feel like something wasn't right, so I decided to just go grab some food and come back. While I was eating I saw police cars and ambulances driving to around where I was before. It turns out there was a murder. Now I always listen to my gut feeling. It didn't save me, but saved a friend. A big group of friends and I were walking home from an event in a town we weren't used to. It was night, and hardly anyone was around, empty streets and all that. We were walking down a sidewalk that had high fences next to it, so when you turned the corner, whatever was around it was out of sight. One of the girls fell behind, distracted by her phone, I think, and I noticed, so I started drifting behind as well, to become a sort of midway point between her and the group. Soon, we were nearing where we were staying, and our group rounded a corner, then started making their way into the yard where our living quarters were. I saw a car drive past us, then turn the corner down the street the girl was still on. As soon as I saw it, I suddenly got this suspicious, awful feeling. So I stopped and went back to the corner to keep an eye on the friend. The car drove past her, stopped, did a complete U-turn, and slowly started creeping up behind/alongside her. She was still on her phone and wasn't noticing a thing. I stepped out from behind the corner and started walking towards her. The car sped off quickly as soon as the driver saw me. It scares me that someone could have grabbed her and none of us would have seen a thing. It would have just been one of those cliche movie moments where you turn around and realize a member of the group is missing. To compound that potential tragedy, she'd just gotten engaged a few weeks prior. I think the fact that we had worked with some safe houses in the area that discussed human trafficking probably aided in me being on high alert, and the area we were in was known for that sort of thing.